Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Financial Tides. Today we are going to be talking about when cash is not king. So, this is the hidden risk of playing it safe. I'm your host today, Taylor Perillo, certified financial planner, and we're going to talk about the times when cash feels safe when it's in your pocket. It doesn't go down, it doesn't fluctuate, it doesn't make headlines, so it feels good. It feels responsible, it even feels disciplined. But I think what people don't even realize is that cash can quietly become one of the riskiest places to keep your money if you don't understand what it's really doing behind the scenes. So, we're going to break down why cash isn't as safe as it feels, how inflation will slightly erode the value of cash over time, long term, where CDs fit into the picture. A lot of people are holding CDs and large cash balances while carrying other debt. And we're really just sometimes creating a false sense of financial security through cash. This isn't an argument against cash. There's always a place for cash. It's just an argument for having intentional cash. The first part, why does cash feel safe? We know that it does. A lot of people hold on to it, and it's because it gives us a sense of certainty. We know exactly how much we have. It doesn't move day to day. You're not watching a stock ticker with investments changing the price. In uncertain times, it's going to give you stability. It's going to feel comfortable, especially after big market volatility. If you get laid off or something different happen in your life. But emotional safety and financial safety aren't always the same thing. So, cash can protect against short term uncertainty, but can also expose you to long term risk. And if you hold too much without a purpose, it may not be the intentional amount or the intentional practice that you think that you're doing. I think that we can always make the argument that, hey, we need some cash. An emergency fund is something that we always say you should have. But having an overfunded emergency fund, which we see far too much of right now, is not the exact thing that we want and the exact thing that is really what makes the most financial sense. And in some cases, it's not important. Your financial security and your financial plan doesn't need big, huge margins or tons of growth, and holding cash can be okay. But we're going to talk mainly about financial optimization here, which is having the best financial outcome, regardless of whether you need to do it or not for the sake of your plan. The first thing is the invisible risk. Cost of doing nothing and inflation. Inflation is the silent tax on cash. So you see that the money is not going up and down, and your money in your bank account is sitting there and it's stagnant. Maybe you're getting a little bit of interest on it. It feels good. It feels predictable. It feels safe. If you're adding to it, you see your money growing, and you don't have to ever worry about opening an account statement and it being any less because it's not fluctuating anywhere. But that doesn't mean prices are going to be exactly the same. So we know that things are getting more expensive, particularly during the pandemic. Things got a lot more expensive, and people started feeling the pain of the pandemic and the pain of inflation. And it started making people feel a little less uneasy about cash, but it didn't do the full effect that I would think it would have done. And that's mainly just because with the pandemic, there's big life changes, big events that are happening. People were getting laid off in some cases, out of work, adjusting to working remotely. And so they didn't necessarily feel that cash was a bad decision, even though things were getting more expensive. And it's just because there was so much change, it felt safe again. So even when prices rise, only 3 or 4% a year, which is kind of what we peg as long-term inflation rates. We know some years they'll go up to 9, and in some years it will barely change. We know long-term, on average, prices are rising about 3 to 4% a year. So that means your money is shrinking by 3 to 4% on average long-term. And that's just the fact that if things are getting more expensive, your purchasing power, what you can spend that exact money that you have in the bank on, is not going as far. If you have to pay, instead of paying $4 for a gallon of milk, you might have to pay down the road $5, which if you didn't keep up with that rate of inflation, your money will be shrinking. So, what does this mean in real terms? Your cash, it's going to buy less groceries. Your cash is going to buy less house. You're going to be able to have less health care down the road. And ultimately, it all points to the one same thing, which is less freedom. So if your cash is earning less than the rate of inflation, you're guaranteed to lose purchasing power. Even though the number in your account never goes down and you don't see it, which is what makes people feel good about it, you're in a position where you're guaranteeing your money is going away, and it may be slow and it may not be seen. It's invisibly going away. So this is what makes cash uniquely dangerous, even though it feels stable. It's the fact that you're quietly losing value. Something along those lines of cash is people say, well, I'm going to go into high yield savings account. I'm going to go into CDs, but those aren't the same thing as growth. So they're alternatives and they're great for your emergency fund, but they are not an alternative. High yield savings accounts and CDs can help offset some of the inflation, but that doesn't mean that they eliminate the problem. They just slow the leak. And the reason being is the times of high interest rates like now where interest rates have went up for a bit, the reason interest rates go up is it comes on the tail of high inflation. So think about what just happened. We just had the global pandemic. We just had housing prices spike. Everything has gone up in price pretty dramatically. We had 9% inflation one year. Okay, so now interest rates go up because we're trying to combat the inflation. We're trying to tighten the spending so the dollar doesn't go quite as far. And that is exactly what we're doing with higher interest rates is we're paying because everything is inflated to try to cool the economy. And now look at what's happening. If you had a 9% inflation year and now you can get a 5% CD, you're still losing 4%. You're still worse off by 4% by holding the money in there. So that's what I mean when I say we're just slowing the leak is even though inflation long term is 3 to 4%, if you look back at CDs and high yield savings accounts, they weren't paying much for the longest time until inflation got worse. So again, long term, the rate of a high yield savings and CDs aren't going to keep up with the rate of inflation. They maybe right now that you can still get 4% on a CD out there and inflation's only about 2.9, 2.8%. So they're doing a better job right now, but that's short term, not long term. So high yield savings accounts. What are the good things about them? Because I'm not saying that we shouldn't be in them at all. Well, the good thing is they offer liquidity, so you have access to your money, and they offer flexibility. Bad thing, rates can change over time. So as the interest rates start coming down, which they are now, you'll see that your high yield is not paying as much. So really the only use for these are kind of it's an emergency fund parking place or a short-term needs parking place where you want to have the stability and liquidity of the funds and you can get them out to cover an emergency, not have money that you're going to use 7, 8, 9 years down the road from now parked in here because you're afraid that it's going to lose money. And then I think the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is just the overuse of CDs as safe money and an emergency fund in particular. And I see this mistake happen a lot is that clients say, I want to have this money in a CD for in case there's an emergency. And the first thing I always say is, if there's an emergency, when is that going to happen? Because if you know when it's going to happen, is it really an emergency? And if you don't know when it's going to happen and your money is tied up in a CD, which you have to pay a penalty for early withdrawals, that's not an emergency fund. That's a parking spot, and you don't want to have to pay penalties to have access to your funds. So I think using CDs as an emergency fund, it may feel safe and you may feel like, oh, I'm getting a better rate of return because CDs typically will pay out a little bit more than money markets for a fixed period of time. That's the main difference is that their rates don't move like on the live market the way if rates come down in a money market, they'll adjust at maturity for the new one. But that's not a place for an emergency fund. Anywhere where your liquidity is tied up, that's not a good place to keep your emergency funds. So, basically, they protect your normal value. They do not protect your purchasing powder, your power. So CDs feel safe. They guarantee a return, but that return still often trails inflation. You lock up money for a certain period of time, and that can come at the cost of the flexibility and the opportunity that you might have to actually pull out the money. So liquidity risk is also another risk. It feels safe in the case of a CD, and it matters just as much as safety overall because money that's locked up, even in a conservative investment like a CD, may not be available when you actually need it. So, and then unexpected needs that don't wait for maturity dates. So these are the things that would come up that, hey, maybe you want to have access to the funds. You don't want it to be tied up in a CD. This is an investment opportunity. Someone comes to you with an idea that you like and you want to throw some money at it. You don't want to have to wait to do that. A family member calls you and says they're really struggling or need help or need a loan, and you want to be able to do that for them. You can't get that out of a CD without a penalty. You want to switch jobs, and there's a period in between the two jobs that you need to have some access to cash to cover the paychecks that you won't be getting that period of time. You can't make that job change if you don't have access to your CD funds. And then finally, the medical expenses. I mean, there's no guarantee when, I mean, unless you schedule a surgery for something that can wait, a lot of times medical expenses will come up unannounced and you'll need to be able to pay those. And you don't want to delay that just because of the CD money not being available. So true financial safety requires access, not just preservation. So we're going to circle it all back to what is cash actually for? Because it does have an important role. It's not just every role. You can't just use cash for everything, but cash is best used for emergency fund. It's used for short-term spending needs, so upcoming vacations, upcoming trips, upcoming income needs if you're in retirement, any planned purchases, so things that are coming in the next 6 to 18 months, and then just having stability during income transitions. So anytime that you're switching jobs, going into retirement, you're going to want to have some cash available to cover those incomes. What it's not ideal for is long-term growth. It's not ideal to fight inflation, and there's no just sitting idle just in case. There's plenty of other parking spots that you can use that aren't cash or money markets or CDs, because you want to have some long-term investments. You want to have some growth, and just in case money, there's plenty of things that have high levels of safety out there that are more tax efficient. So we haven't even hit on the fact that CDs and money markets are both completely taxable. Any interest that you do earn will be taxed to you, and then any of that interest you'll have some sort of shrinkage. So 3.5% if you're getting that on a CD, when you have to pay the interest tax on it on your tax return, you're not getting that full 3.5%. You're having some tax shrinkage. Whereas if you invest in something, say like an exchange traded fund, an ETF, it'll retain the gains and it'll keep the gains moving forward until you actually need the funds rather than forcing you to realize interest every year. So just on the tax efficiency side there, but sitting idle just in case there is safer or just as safe or close to as safe places that you can put the funds and have it be just in case money without having to be in pure cash or money market. I use those terms kind of interchangeably here. So just to be clear, cash and money markets or cash-like investments, cash alternatives, they're all kind of lumped into one category here of the general term cash. So the other place where cash is not ideal, offsetting high interest debt. So this is one that I see far too often. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that's out there when it comes to cash is that people will keep high credit card debt or high interest debt, and say, I need to have cash on hand in case an emergency comes up. But they forget the biggest difference there. If you're paying 28% on a credit card, which is a pretty average credit card APR, and you're getting 4% sitting in cash and safe money, you're losing 24% on that money every single month, every bit of that credit card debt that you're continuing to carry, you're 24% worse off. But people forget, if you say only have $2,000, and I'm not saying don't make your bills by paying off your credit card debt, but say you have an extra $2,000 and you pay that extra $2,000 towards a $10,000 credit card debt, so you're only carrying $8,000, and an emergency comes up, then you could put the money back on a credit card. You don't have to worry about an if and just in case. Because if you do, you have the credit card that you can lean back on just in case. And guess what? You put the $2,000 that you would have used towards that emergency back on the credit card. Now you're at $10,000 in credit card debt. You're no worse off. You're in the exact same spot. But if you don't have, and this is the big if you don't have that emergency, then you're paying less interest on that $8,000. And you basically gave yourself a 24% net difference from one to the other. So it's just a simple exchange like that, that there's no reason to carry extra interest debt to have more of an emergency fund and have more just in case money, because you'll be just guaranteeing that you're paying that extra interest instead of trying to get that taken care of and hoping that there's no emergency. We know hope isn't a strategy, but if there is no emergency, you'll be better off. And if there is an emergency, you'll be in the exact same place you are now anyway. So it doesn't make a difference. Pay off that and be better for interest if no emergency happens. So, in conclusion, every dollar that you have should have a job that it's accomplishing, whether it is an emergency fund, whether it is working for you long term. But the long term projection for cash isn't a job. You can't just keep all your dollars in long term for cash. You shouldn't keep anything extra above a necessary emergency fund in cash because it is not working for you. So the final conclusion, cash isn't bad, but unintentional cash is expensive. And if you take 5 minutes this week to ask yourself the following question, I think you'll start to realize that it's more psychological than it is actually something that makes sense. And I think the questions that I want you to ask yourself are, why am I holding on to this cash? What is it for? What's it accomplishing? That's the first question. Why are you holding on to it? What is it really protecting me from? So, is there an emergency? If you have $500,000 in cash, is there a $500,000 emergency that might happen? And then what's it costing me over time? So this isn't just the, hey, it's not costing me anything. My bank doesn't charge me a fee. It's, no, what's it costing me in the form of opportunity cost? What else could I be doing with this that would make it better? So if you want help building a cash strategy that actually keeps you safe, that doesn't sacrifice your long-term progress, please reach out. We're happy to help align your safety and growth with what your needs are and what your wants are. And if you know somebody who's sitting on cash for a while and still feeling financially stressed, please share this episode with them. We think that it can help a lot, and we want everyone to know that sometimes playing it safe is actually the riskiest move of all, because you're not able to actually financially optimize, and you're hurting yourself in the long term. So thank you for watching Financial Tides. We appreciate your time here today, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
John Perillo and Taylor Perillo are financial advisors offering securities through Cetera Advisors LLC, a registered broker-dealer, doing insurance business in California as CFGA Insurance Agency LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera firms are under separate ownerships from any other named entity. California insurance licenses number 0F60123 and 0M90666, 6265 Greenwich Drive, Suite 251, San Diego, California 92122. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera Advisors LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Cetera Advisors LLC nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice.